All right, I'll go ahead and start. So it's great to be here. Thanks again for the invitation, Kieran, and all these guys, SkuChain and Coinify for hosting this. So again, my name's Tim Swanson. I'm not sure if you've seen my stuff. I've done a lot of research in this space. I guess I have many minority views, as they are. But fortunately, I got to have two quotable people here today. Peter Todd, if you guys don't know, he's worked on a lot of different projects in this space. Provides quite a bit of objective analysis. He's not out there pumping stuff. And Vitalik, obviously all of you guys know. For those of you who are looking at the recording later on, he's basically the creator along with Joseph of Ethereum. And he's done quite a bit of research on this whole cryptoeconomic space and helped put together some, spearheaded some ideas on proof of stake, which is the next panel. So today, we're going to be talking about everyone's favorite topic, proof of work. And that was some work right there. So just out of curiosity, how many people in this room, raise your hand, how many of you have ever mined before? Mined any kind of coin? Dogecoin counts, yeah. Like that. All right, great. So most of you here. All right, so I'm gonna throw some questions I've prepared for this. So Peter, this past summer in July, you mentioned that a lot of the VCs in the space, through the creation of a centralized blockchain, what's kind of occurred, you basically recreate a very expensive version of PayPal. What does that actually mean? Like, what were you thinking then?
So I went and actually wrote a thing on the Bitcoin development mailing list maybe a year, geez, it's probably even a year and a half ago now, or 2 years or something, and it kind of pointed out how with scalability, we can solve every single problem with sharding, with this, with that, in the current Bitcoin system, except for one single thing, deciding what transactions get into the blockchain. And of course with PayPal, I mean, we could imagine the exact equal thing. Every transaction on PayPal could be put on a blockchain, you could spread it around, we could audit, we could do everything we wanted, except the moment PayPal decided to freeze your funds, you'd be screwed. And what I was really trying to get at with that is a way that if you invite regulation, if you invite all the stuff that Bitcoin was, I believe, was trying to get away from, ultimately you have PayPal plus mining. Or it'd be much better off to go have PayPal and get rid of the silly mining thing, which is very expensive.
Well, why is it expensive for people who are listening?
Well, I mean, essentially in mining, you go say, I'm going to outspend every attacker, and I don't know how big my attackers are, so I'm going to spend a lot of money and cross my fingers and hope that's good enough. And unfortunately, in a fully decentralized system, it's the best you can do. But when you go have mining that in reality is regulated, you know, in reality, the whole ecosystem is held by a small number of parties, it becomes pretty ludicrous to go spend all this money and get no benefit. Precisely because you've got the system where the rules of the system say the moment an attacker outspends you, burns more energy, creates more proof of work, they're the ones who now control history.
Okay, and earlier this past month, I know Jonathan Levine made a joke. He said we have a three generals problem now because of pools. And just recently, you mentioned how Vitalik, you mentioned how the way pools operate today, we basically have a 5 of 10 multi-sig that issues a Coinbase. What are you saying with that? What does that mean?
I mean, it's very simple. You have a total of like 3 pools controlling over 50% of the mining network, like 10 pools controlling over 3/4. And then on the other level, you have maybe 2 or 3 times as many actual ASIC farms controlling the whole thing. So, we're spending $600 million a year in order to maintain this mining infrastructure. And the level of security we're getting at it actually is, the comment that I had made 6 months ago when I was writing an article on mining after visiting China was that decentralization, noun, definition, the security assumption that a 19-year-old in Shenzhen and some random guy that we don't really know where he is at all are not going to decide to collude with each other. So, back then, the 19-year-old in Shenzhen, of course, being Discus Fish, and actually, no, the 19-year-old is in Hangzhou, sorry, totally different. Discus Fish and the guy we don't really know about at all being Ghash. So, right now it's slightly better and people are saying, oh, problem solved. But the thing is that back in 2011, Deepbit was the pool getting up to 50%. 2012, it sort of got more decentralized again, and actually I was the one proclaiming that the mining centralization problem had been solved. And in 2013, we're right back to Ghash. So, you know, if you can sort of define centralization in terms of the number of people that need to collude in order to break a mechanism, we're actually not doing much better than a 5 of 10 multisig.
Although I would point out I'm maybe a little more hopeful than that after I only sold half my Bitcoins, not 100%. And, you know, I would go point out that because of the way mining works, if something goes wrong, there's avenues to go and fix the process. You know, it's kind of like a political system in that if the government does something bad, if the democratic process still works, we can vote them out in the next election. In this case, in democracy, that laughter was very apropos. In this case, you know, miners, I should really say hashers, people actually possessing mining hashing power, it's still reasonably well distributed. You can still imagine that, you know, people leaving pools and going to another pool. It needs something pretty bad to happen before people care. I mean, ghash.io did attacks against gambling sites, and nobody really cared. But then again, nobody really likes gambling sites that much. So,
marginalized people. Here. So Matthew, he just finished, I believe, his PhD this past year, right?
No, master's in computer science.
Computer science, okay. And you wrote a paper on ASIC resistance, I believe, that was published on GitHub.
Oh yeah. So I had my own approach to tackling ASIC resistance. My sort of idea was that if we take a problem like SAT, something where you have periodic updates, like periodic breakthroughs, where you have that algorithms for solving the problem become much faster, then this would be very resistant to an ASIC implementation, because what you would have is you'd have an implementation. These take like 9 months to crank out, and then like you would have simultaneously researchers working with CPUs coming up with a alternative algorithm that would then obviate the ASIC instance. However, ultimately, like, we decided not to go with this one with Ethereum. Instead, we're working on a memory hard solution in the style of Hashimoto, if anybody is familiar with that particular approach. And right now, we're just finalizing the design. It will be shipped in March. And so, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. I'm sure all of you guys know what an ASIC and resistance and all that stuff is at this point. If you guys are listening in video, then just have to look it up on Google. So I've mentioned this to a couple different people, this Maginot Line narrative about attacking the network with hash rate. Like, you see this often on social media, people saying, oh, in order to attack the network, you have to have 50%. But there's many other ways to actually attack the network at this point because of centralization. And I know Vitalik and Peter, you guys have talked about this. So, like, we see these side channel attacks, essentially, these out-of-band attacks where you go hack into a router or hack into a node or simply blackmail an employee at one of these pools. Like, what is the actual real cost of attacking a pool or attacking the network?
So I'll go point out that the cost of a 51% attack is the maximum cost it would take to destroy the Bitcoin network, not a minimum. And that's exactly it. I mean, if I wanted to destroy Bitcoin, I mean, maybe one way I could do it for near zero cost is to go on Reddit and convince people to go accept changes to Bitcoin that would go destroy it in the end. You know, things like making it unverifiable, making a block size that nobody can go and verify. You know, it can be as simple as something like that. It could be as simple as going off to ghash.io and meeting, you know, their kids and kidnapping them. I mean, it's not really clear how to define. I'm always willing to go talk about what's possible, not what should happen. But, you know, it's very hard to define what the costs are because it's just a matter of getting control of the points of control that control hashing power. And equally, when you go talk about cost, do you mean for me to go make one, you know, so-called bad block, 2 bad blocks, 3? the longer the attack is meant to go on, the higher the costs are. Probably the closer they approximate me actually needing a whole bunch of hashing power. But it's very unclear as to, what the boundaries are. I mean, I get the feeling you could probably get away with stealing, say, 10% of the hashing power of a couple big pools, and they probably wouldn't notice. I really doubt their internal auditing is good enough to see this kind of stuff. And variance and so forth is very large. And, well, what can you do with 10% of the hashing power? Well, I can go make a fork and fool people into accepting Bitcoins after a while. It's just not really clear.
What about you? What do you see for potentials of attack?
Yeah, I mean, basically, the thing is that with these mining pools, if you manage to hack into 3 mining pools, and if you manage to pull off, say, a 10 confirmation double spend against them, then what do the mining pools that get hacked ultimately end up losing? I mean, the maximum is 25 BTC multiplied by 10 blocks, which is $75,000 across all of them. And the minimum is that they lose nothing because the pools that get hacked are on the winning fork.
The maximum is the Bitcoin price tanks.
Right. Well, then you have this situation that, if there's lots of pools, then lots of mining farms, that each one has fairly little individual incentive not to make that happen. And also, given that this whole industry is kind of being sort of commercialized over time, and commercial mining ventures, I think, are going to be getting interested in things like hedging. And once that happens, then that particular disincentive doesn't even exist at all. So, they really don't lose that much if a mining pool doesn't really lose all that much if it gets hacked. So.
And of course, if you're a government organization and you go say, all right, Bitcoin's going to be banned, we're going to go give you a heads up a week in advance, and if you want to play game, well, we're not going to throw you mining operators in jail, but by the way, could you go help us out with this attack? For them, the incentive to go help Bitcoin is suddenly zero. I mean, if anything, it's negative. So if you're going to look at pure, economic incentives, well, yeah, I'm sure they would go off and turn their mining gear to creating a big Bitcoin fork or something. It's all sort of squishy human notions that aren't easy to model.
All right, let's move from attacks, because I know you guys aren't going to attack the network anytime soon. Let's move to blocks. This has been something that's being talked about. How does proof of work, or how does the current process of verifying blocks change from once we go from 1 meg to supposedly 20 meg as proposed by Gavin, or even a free-floating or infinite block size? How does that change in terms of the incentives involved with that? Peter, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think the big thing is the ability to go verify people are actually following the rules goes down. When you go have 1 megabyte, that's 50 gigabytes of data per year max. That's something that's very, very easy to deal with. When you have 20, well, that's a terabyte of data per year. Suddenly that's getting to the point where it's not really clear how I can go verify the whole blockchain behind a Tor connection. Suddenly it's not clear, well, if something does happen to a mining pool, can we go replace that mining pool easily? Or is someone going to have to sort of get up to speed? And I mean, Gavin's proposal is that the block size doubles after the 20 megabytes. So you get 20, 40, 80, and so on. And ultimately, if you're not verifying the blockchain in the current Bitcoin architecture, you're trusting miners to do it for you. You're trusting miners with all the rules. And you may not necessarily know immediately if those rules are broken, like someone changes the inflation schedule. And if you don't know, well, it's a total toss-up. I mean, what happens socially if miners decide to go do this? We just don't know.
So I guess one point is that, people... So one point here is that, people are talking about blockchain scalability and how blockchain scalability is hard. The thing is, blockchain scalability is easy. You just make the block size go up and up and up and up, and the number of nodes verifying every transaction goes down and down and down. And in the limit, you've just made a $600 million a year version of PayPal. That's fine. The hard part is ensuring simultaneous blockchain scalability and decentralization. So, that's probably the, so in general, I'll probably get into this more on the scalability panel, but the way I try to think about the issue is that there's really 2 metrics that we're trying to optimize for. One metric is the cost of a transaction, And the second metric is, what is the largest size of node that people in the network need to have. So, if you have a system where there's 1 million nodes, but each of them can be a desktop, then that's fine. But if you have 1,000 nodes and each one of them needs to be Google running an AWS instance or whatever, then, it's kind of starting to lose the benefits.
Matthew, how is it handled in Ethereum with fees and block size? You guys are going to go proof of stake, I believe, right at this point, right?
Eventually.
No, eventually. Right now we're going with proof of work.
And what does that look like compared to the way it's done with Bitcoin?
So right now, the way that Ethereum is going to be charging fees is that clients will propose gas prices, and then every transaction will count the number of compute steps, the gas units, and then you will pay the gas price times the gas unit. This is a little bit different than the way that Bitcoin works. In Bitcoin, you can just expect largely that your transaction, you can have a transaction for free. We know that mining is like subsidized currently in Bitcoin, although it's going to end. And so they don't really have the same sort of economics problem that we have. But that being said, it's still subsidized right now in Ethereum, and so we should expect that gas prices are going to be rather low. And actually, I've been working on studying the different sort of economic models that you might. So there's 2 different mechanisms we might want to use. I've been considering another one over the weekend. I'm hoping maybe I could give a talk on that later, but maybe not right now is a good time.
We have other panels to talk about with that. So a question for you guys now. Why don't we put Ethereum or all these other chains onto a side chain? Like we've talked about, I know you've talked about security. We've seen, if you haven't seen Namecoin, check out their hash rate. It's a half of Bitcoin's hash rate at this point, and that's for being free and all that. So like, what's the security issue in terms of if you could mine it for free, you could also attack it for free? I think you've been talking about this.
Yeah, so I mean, that proposal would be to have Ethereum as a merge mine sidechain to Bitcoin. And what's interesting with merge mining is, I mean, if you're not up to date on it, you're essentially saying, well, you can go and use as proof of work that you did for a completely different blockchain. And I mean, I like to use the analogy of, imagine if we're just in Canada deciding we want to make our elections stronger with more people voting. So we're going to let Americans vote in our elections. And as long as America has the same interest as hard as Canadians do, we're fine. It'll be great. Nobody else can outvote us. Equally, if they don't, it may not work so well. Now, in practice, America could probably nuke Canada, but they're not going to do that, so it might be a decent solution. And in Bitcoin, I mean, Namecoin, I think that's an example where it looks like a pretty decent solution. But the moment someone has a lot of money and says, look, I wish to go and bribe you miners to go destroy Namecoin, well, what does it actually take for them in terms of Bitcoin to do so? Namecoin, the reward for actually mining Namecoin is extremely low because Namecoins aren't worth very much and you don't get that much per block. So what's your opportunity cost to going and attacking Namecoin? Well, it's also very low, even if you assume Namecoins are valuable to you. If you're building Namecoin 2 and Namecoin 1 is competitor to you, well, opportunity cost may be, negative. I mean, I want to go attack Namecoin because its existence does me harm. So merge mining, trying to analyze economic incentives to attack or not attack a given chain becomes very complex. And I mean, me personally, the moment I see something complex that I'm relying on, I'd much rather not rely on that. I'd much rather rely on something simple and easy.
I guess another point is that there are people who are conceive of merge mine sidechains, and we don't need the sidechain part. You could just use merge mine altcoins as a scalability solution. And that's also, I think, misguided to some degree because, let's say case 1, you have everything goes on the Bitcoin blockchain. Let's say you have 1 gigabyte blocks. Okay, fine. If he wants to mine, so the largest size of the node that you need to have in the network is a node that can process a gigabyte every 10 minutes. Now let's say, okay, we want scalability. We're going to do merge mine sidechains. So we're going to have Bitcoin 001, Bitcoin 002, ... Bitcoin 999. All of them are merge mined with each other. Each one only needs to have a megabyte per block. Now, guess what? If he wants to participate in the system as a miner, in order for the thing to be secure, all the miners still have to verify, still have to merge mine most of these sidechains, and so all the miners still have to have the ability to verify basically a gigabyte a block. So it's, it doesn't really break through the sort of fundamental trade-off there. So, people, if we sort of try and go in that direction, it's potential we have relatively equivalent consequences to what would happen if we just went all in a single chain.
All right, I know we're kind of running low on time, so I'm going to do one last question. I want to ask the audience, and I'm going to ask you guys. So the question is this. There's supposedly a hard fork civil war discussion going on about block sizes and fees and stuff like that. So just out of curiosity, raise your hand in the audience if you think there will be a hard fork civil war of some kind with Bitcoin.
We think there will be, or if we
will be.
support it?
You don't have to, doesn't matter if you support it. The technical spot. Do you think that there will actually take place? Anybody? Oh, so about 20% of the audience. Okay. So each one of you try and get it down to a tweetable phrase. What do you guys think is going to happen, and will it be resolved with one major fork winning out?
$500 an hour, and I'll participate in the war.
What about you, Vitalik?
I really don't care all that much.
Ethereum dev.
Yeah, I guess it would be good for Ethereum then, right?
It's a new thing. Like on Reddit, Bitcoin, it's good for Bitcoin. So now you're saying this is good for Ethereum. I see. Hashtag that one. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time.